Hello, I'm Amanda Sutt, and I'm the creative director at Rock Paper Scissors, a marketing and branding firm located just outside of Atlanta. We recently did a presentation with one of our community partners on infographics, and we thought it was a good piece that we wanted to share on our YouTube channel as well as share with our contacts as well. And just to kind of give you a little overview of what goes into an infographic and what is included in it and why is it complicated, but also why is this complicated thing so powerful and why do we keep talking about it? So I want to start with a quote from Jeff Bullas, and this is a great overview of what it is. So infographics are a mix of design, writing, and analysis that are ideal for this age of big data. They take deep data and present it as visual shorthand. Love that idea. Infographics is one efficient way of combining the best of text, images, and design to represent complex data that tells a story that begs to be shared. And that's just, I feel like, such a great way to kind of embody what's in an infographic. So it's charts, it's diagrams, it's illustrations, all combined in a very, very visually striking way. So next question is, so why do we need infographics? If we could tell a story or put a picture. But we want to consider that because text alone has infinite number of ways that we can combine it. And it allows deep meaning through analysis of really complex concepts. But it really relies on the reader's ability to process that information. So you have some limitation of who your audience is. And then graphics, on the other hand, might be easier for the reader to understand, but are not as effective in communicating a very specific and sometimes abstract, complicated concepts. So combining that text and the graphic together, as well as throwing some numbers in there, just makes it a more efficient way to communicate with people. All right, so 90% of people in our community are visual learners. That is how information is processed. So that is a huge statistic that we like to take into consideration when we're thinking about how we're creating the story and how do we want to present it. So that tells us we need some visual aspects of this. We also know that 65% of learners are visual learners, meaning that's how they perceive information. So that other 35% reading is great, but that means that a majority of our people need that supporting graphic. So let's talk a little bit about effectiveness of retaining information. So of the things people hear, they retain about 10% of it. Of the things they read, they retain about 20%. These numbers aren't very high if we're thinking about somebody keeping information. However, if we can do something or let them see something, they're more like 80% higher retention rate of information. So with that stat alone, if we have something that's important enough to say, if we're just saying it, if we're just reading it, we're not going to hit at the level we need to. We need to have typically an interaction or them actually seeing something. Hence, why our infographic piece is not just a blog. All right, some other great stats about it is infographics are liked and shared 3 times more than any other content out on the internet right now. They're also easier to read, and that makes them 30 times more likely to be read in an article than just text. So even if you are doing an article, throwing in some visuals with infographics will really help people absorb what's in there. It also increases traffic. So specifically in the publishing industry, they've had a 12% growth in traffic when they're using infographics. So that's a nice little bump up. Just some side things to keep into consideration. If you incorporate color, it increases the reader's attention span by 80% versus something in black and white, so it really stands out. Don't want to overdo it, but those are things to keep in mind. All right, so let's talk about, now we've talked about what an infographic is, let's get into how do you actually go about making one. So let's talk about the order of operations. And with anything that we create, not just infographics, but it's always content first and then graphics second. That means we know what's going to go into it, and we've also focused on the story that we're trying to tell. So that's why we want to start at that place. Once we know what the story is, then we can figure out the graphics and visuals that go into it. So we write the story, then we create the graphics, and not the other way around. So let's talk about some compelling components of an infographic. So first, you need a really strong intro, a headline that people, latch onto. I have an example of "Save the Bees." I'll show you what the whole thing looks like. It's this really long piece that's on the left. We blew it up a little bit so you can see, but that main header stands out so that you want to at least are interested enough to keep going down through the piece. Then it just needs to be an interesting story. We don't want to bore people. We need to be able to cut through the clutter. The American Peanut Foundation did this fun infographic about peanuts that they put out there. So that's something that gets people's attention and stands out. We also need informative stats. So it needs to be valuable, it needs to be relevant, and it needs to be accurate. And also be sure to give credit to your sources. The way infographics are set up, these are a digital document. You typically don't print them, so you have as much space as you need. So put that credit at the bottom to make sure you're giving credit where credit is due. For instance, there you go. There's an example of one that we've created based on this presentation, which we'll have on our blog post as well. So you also want simple and clean design. You want to make sure that the right pieces of information are sticking out and being effective. You also need attention-grabbing graphics and images that cut through the clutter of the amount of information that we're being put in front of our eyeballs every day. And then you want to make sure that your brand is present and that it looks like your brand so that people see it and recognize who you are. You don't want it to be totally different so you don't get the credit for having created this information. And that's what don't forget, consistent branding matters. When we only have seconds and milliseconds to get somebody's attention, people are more likely to read something that's familiar to them. So you want to make sure that the brand and the piece that you're creating is a reflection of your brand that will help your engagement, that will build on the asset that is your brand moving forward. So I want to thank everybody today for your time, for listening to this. Please, if you have any questions, please post comments below. We will reach back out to you. And if you ever need help with infographics, we are here to help you.